Hello everyone, so welcome back to my channel. Today we will discuss an essay by Samuel Moyn, Human Rights and Age of Inequality. So today we will discuss this important essay and as well as one of the famous essay. So in perspective of contemporary human rights movement and in perspective of contemporary modern times as well. So, but before I start my lecture, my usual request is if you are new to this channel and if you have not subscribed my channel yet, please do not forget to subscribe the channel. And if you like the video series, please do not forget to share it with your friends. Okay, so now without wasting our time, let's start our discussion. So first, to understand this essay, we will start from the very basic foundation of this essay, Constitution. So the very basic foundation of this essay starts from Constitution of the United States of America. So why? Because the author of this essay has discussed all these things based on United States of America's Constitution. Okay, so you have to know this or we have to know this. Basically, so the Constitution was written during the summer of 1787 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania by 55 delegates to a constitutional convention that was called ostensibly to amend the Articles of Confederation. Actually, so this US Constitution was kind of amendment of Articles of Confederation or a kind of constitution that Confederate States had already drafted. So then it became the first constitution of US. Okay, so moving ahead, we have to know about another person in very brief, James Madison. So he was fourth president of United States now. Why should one know about this person? Because this person actually contributed lot of ideas or played key role in formation of US Constitution. He suggested some of the rights, so which were known as or which are known as Bill of Rights. This person suggested the rights to be included in US Constitution that are primarily known as Bill of Rights. So this person is also known as father of the Constitution of US. Okay, so this is very brief knowledge on him. Now next thing we have to know is Bill of Rights. So what is Bill of Rights now? So in United States Constitution, Bill of Rights actually are the packages of rights, or they were the first 10 amendments to the US Constitution. If we talk about our country's context, then in our country's context also, time and often these politicians they keep on amending the constitution. So amendment means trying to improve or trying to adding something that was not in the previous part. So Bill of Rights is the first 10 amendments to the US Constitution. When US Constitution so included 10 amendments under the rights segment, then that was actually the Bill of Rights. So next thing we have to know about is second Bill of Rights. So propounded by the then President of US Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay, so the person you can see on picture is Franklin D. Roosevelt. Now you will be asking me who was that or who is this person. So he was 32nd President of US. So he was 32nd President of US, and he brought the Economic Bill of Rights. Now why he brought Economic Bill of Rights? Why this person should be known? He brought Economic Bill of Rights because he felt that US Constitution lacked something, lacked a kind of modern definition of rights. Because US Constitution defines human rights in a very traditional way, in a very conservative way that only guarantees life, right to life and liberty. But in modern times, people need right to job, people need right to job with decent income, right to health, right to security, right to other different kind of financial and social securities. So he came up with the argument. He said that we cannot be content no matter how high that general standard of living may be if some fraction of our people, whether it be one third or one fifth or one tenth, is ill fed and ill clothed, ill housed and insecure. Basically he is trying to say that though the standard of living may be very high, but still there are some people in US who are poor, who are suffering from poverty. So to reduce the poverty of those people, to reduce the poverty of one fifth or one tenth, we have to come up with the rights that will guarantee jobs and good economic income to those people. So this person introduced second Bill of Rights to be included in US Constitution, which is also known as the Economic Bill of Rights, because basically its purpose was to assure the economic rights or economic stability for the common folks. Okay, so now let's move ahead. So he said his famous quote is, necessitous men are not free men. Those men who require something, they are not free men. They are kind of captivated person in socio-political scenarios. So if we have to define US Constitution, then US Constitution has two parts. Okay, when it was drafted, so it basically propounded, or it basically preached about political rights in constitution, like right of free speech, then right of free press, free worship, trial by jury, freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures. And these political rights later on they proved inadequate to assure in equality in the pursuit of happiness. So this the pursuit of happiness became very much important later in modern times, because Franklin D. Roosevelt in his Economic Bill of Rights tries to justify the need of modern rights by saying that though our constitution has guaranteed political rights, right to life, right to free speech, but these rights are not enough in modern times, because they cannot guarantee our happiness. In pursuit of happiness, what more rights we need? So we need economic security. Just being free, just surviving is not enough. Basically the traditional concept of rights defines that surviving is right, but now in modern times surviving alone is not right. Surviving alone is not right. So he came up with these examples, like the right to a useful and remunerative job. He says that one needs to have job. Second, he says that the right to earn enough to provide adequate food and clothing and recreation, means if you have job, that job should provide you enough remuneration or enough income. Next thing, he says that the right of every farmer to raise and sell his product at a return which will give him and his family a decent living. Okay, so these were some of the modern rights that was actually included, or that were actually included in US Constitution. Okay, so now moving ahead, basic thing was the rights to life and liberty versus the pursuit of happiness. Traditional concept of rights try to define the rights to life and liberty for US citizen, but modern concept of rights they try to define that rights should be given for the cause of happiness. If people are not happy, then being alive does not have any meaning. Surviving has no meaning. Okay, so now next person that we need to know here is Eleanor Roosevelt. Who was Eleanor Roosevelt? Of course, by the name also many of you might have idea that she was actually American diplomat, humanitarian, and the first lady. Of course, first lady because she was wife of the then president Franklin D. Roosevelt. Okay, so why she became popular? She became popular because she was in the team that declared universal human rights, okay, through UN. So she played a key role in drafting the universal kind of human rights for the people throughout the world, throughout the globe. So this lady, so she played key role in UN's declaration of human rights in 1948. So you may remember that 10th December is also celebrated as International Human Rights Day. Okay, so this is how why we should know her. Now next thing is, what are some of the features of Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was declared in 1948. So in detail you can read yourself also, but so basic things that we now know. Okay, so we will not discuss here. Now we will come to parable of Croesus. So now this essayist starts his essay by telling us a story about one of the famous and one of the richest king of ancient Greece. So in ancient Greece, in one of the state whose name was Lydia, there was a king called Croesus. He was very rich and he was famous also. So once then what happened, one of another person who was also famous advocate lawyer from the city of Athens, nearby city, visited this Croesus. And now Croesus took Solon to visit around his palace to show his wealth, to show his possessions. And then Croesus asked Solon that who might be the happiest person in the world. thinking that Solon might be naming him at once. But Solon, to his surprise, names that the happiest person in the world is someone called Taylor's, isn't it? And not you. And then again Croesus asks him, then who might be the second happiest person in the world? Again Solon replied that second happiest person are Vito and his brother. Then now look at here, Croesus did not feel bad because he felt bad but he did not mind it, thinking that Solon's arguments will not make any difference to me. Now why the author starts now reference of Croesus. Croesus was the a very rich king, but the problem was that even though he provided people with different kind of rights and justices, he was not able to understand the people's happiness. He was not able to provide that happiness that people need in a state, in a country. So being rich does not guarantee that you will be happy person. Even because Croesus also suffered a very terrible ending. He so lost his two sons, and then he was captured by Persian Empire. Okay, so he used to think that he will be rich or prosperous for his whole life. But Solon replies that a person cannot be judged a happiest person until he is alive. A person's life can be judged whether he was happy or sad when he dies. So during the latter part of Croesus' life, though he was very rich, he had some kind of arrogance also. He used to believe that he will be same kind of richer throughout life. But to his surprise, or unfortunately, Persian Empire invaded his empire and he was captured and he tried to burn himself on fire. But suddenly, yes, and he remembered Solon's argument and then he started saying Solon, Solon. Then one of his worker Cyrus, as you can see here on picture, comes and saves him. So here the story of Croesus says that being rich is not enough. What is the goal? The goal is to be happy. So the author wants to prove that what kind of declarations were there in Universal Human Rights Declaration by UN. They tried to make all the people happy, but they could not achieve that. Only those few European countries citizens, only US citizens, they achieved the target declared by UN in Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Other people, third world countries people could not achieve that. That is the problem now. Okay, so now look at here. Then the author brings example of modern Croesus. Modern Croesus here can be called as like Elon Musk, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, isn't it? These people can be called as modern Croesus because they are more rich. And modern Croesus, they are much richer than the old Croesus. They like own millions and billions of property. So what is the problem? Problem is in this world the privilege is acquired by enjoyed by few, where most of people are masses. They contribute their labor, they contribute their time. So throughout the day they work day and night hard, but they cannot also attain that state. The property, the wealth is controlled by very few in the world. The world of Croesus is just in utopia. Now look at here. If we take, for example, if someone is their billionaire or millionaire, and if he imagines that he will donate some money and he will make the world perfect, then this kind of imagination for that person is just utopia. Now, what is utopia? Utopia is an imagined place or state of things in which everything is perfect. So utopia is just an imagined place or state of things in which everything is perfect. So utopia is never possible to be achieved. Utopia cannot be achieved because such heaven kind of places, such paradise kind of places is not possible to be achieved, even if some filthy ones, some filthy rich people, billionaires and millionaires, they contribute something for the eradication of poverty and for the eradication of indigence. So it is the utopia. The problem is, okay, Universal Declaration of Human Rights by UN was a kind of utopian world. The world so hoped or a dream that everything will be perfect, a kind of perfect world imagination, which was not possible because until that this world will last, as long as this world will last, there will be few people controlling over the vast resources and all the economy, and masses will always be under their domination. So the in modern conscious world, the author says pursuit of happiness is more important. In modern conscious world, the pursuit of property, money is not important. Pursuit of happiness. So how life should be judged, or how human rights should be judged. Human rights should be judged by seeing whether people are happy or not. So, any ceiling on wealth gap between rich and poor is absent from the Universal Declaration. The problem is, I have already explained, in Universal Declaration of Human Rights was, so what was absent? The laws, that kind of rules, that kind of policies were absent, that, okay, demanded that, like, favored that gap between rich and poor will be minimum. So, moving ahead, the author tries to say that just living is not enough. Living is not enough. What we need job, we need good income, we need security, social security, everything that a modern person needs in sense of modern survival. So now look at here, but these things sometimes are supposed to be given, or we hear that yes, people have been treated equally, but these kind of treatment are also not good. He basically says that protective equality is dominant, and it is the biggest inequality ever seen. So we see that some people are being given jobs under quota system and under different uh, preservation system, but these kind of system, protective SNL equality or protective discrimination itself is the biggest SNL kind of inequality created by the laws and drafts. So further, the essay says human rights, even perfectly realized human rights, are compatible with inequality, even radical inequality. So when we talk about human rights drafted by whites, those human rights are somewhat they are hidden, or they are implicit with radical inequality, because they do not provide, they do not show support, or they do not promote a kind of equality throughout the world in every kind of places. So there are loopholes, there are lapses in those human rights defined by UN. Okay, so let's move ahead. Now then, the essay says it's too late and outdated fashion to champion the human rights. The essayist also disagrees with now UN's discussion of human rights, because he says that talking about human rights in modern time, in modern century, is useless, because now we have to go beyond these human rights and we have to talk about more rights, rights of jobs, employment, and social security, health security. So he says that why to talk this in the mid 20th century while the whole Europe has already discussed the economic rights. Okay, so basically he brings here the reference of US. He says that US diplomats, US intellectuals, they are discussing about human rights very lately. Why? Because these kind of human rights have already been discussed in Europe, because Europe had already faced World War First, World War Second, and then different kinds of communist protest and revolution. So in Europe, these kind of human rights discussion had already been made, but in US, human rights is very okay new to them, and which is not so good. He says that because European countries, they were threatened very early by communist egalitarianism, okay, by Russia and Karl Marx, and then so Engels need ratification in human rights. So basically, so we are being this issue or this topic or this title has become very banal, very outdated, very normal, very ordinary. Now we need improvement in human rights. We need to improve it. We need to include more kind of very modern rights. Okay, so let's move ahead. Now then he so again shows some of the lapses in Bill of Economic Rights, so advocated by Franklin D. Roosevelt. What are three important facts, are kind of three important loopholes in that kind of economic rights propounded by or advocated by Franklin D. Roosevelt? First weakness or loophole was it showed that America entered into human rights arena very lately. While look at here, you can see here on map. So Atlantic countries. So now look at here. If we look at Western European countries, they had already entered into human rights discussion, whereas this US and Canada, they entered in this arena very lately. Second was that Franklin D. Roosevelt, he understated the actually egalitarian aspirations that every version of welfareism proclaimed. Not a floor of protection for the masses, but the end of special privilege for the few, a ceiling on equality, on inequality. So here in second point, the author is trying to say that Franklin D. Roosevelt missed advocacy about protection for the masses. Rather, Franklin D. Roosevelt, like his predecessors, he also discussed more about ending special privileges for the few. But this is not the solution. If we want to provide human rights, modern human rights to masses, we should not talk about ending special privileges for the few. Of course, if some people are billionaire and millionaire, they will have some special privileges. We cannot end that. But what should be our goal? What should be our aim? Our aim should be to provide the floor of protection for the masses. We should rather talk about masses, we should rather think about masses than being jealous and thinking about ending very special privileges for the few. Then third, now third point is it was to be nationally organized. Okay, why everyone? Now look at here, it was to be so internationally organized. The problem is it was to be internationally organized. Human rights, when it was declared, it was supposed that every it will be implemented throughout the world. Every government will implement these human rights concept and will try to improve the economy and human rights index in their country. But what happened in United States and in some of the European countries only these kind of UN's convictions, policies, strategies work. So they developed. Rest of the third world countries they could not develop. They could not match the US progress rate. They could not match the European countries so progress speed. So because of this nationalistic progress of few countries, everyone from third world countries are willing to leave their country and go for US. Okay, so now look at here. The author says make it international. The convictions of the implementation of human rights should be international, not national. Not it shouldn't be only implemented for the people of US, Canada, and then Atlantic European countries. So this shows problem with Roosevelt's welfareism. National has become over dominant. So he says neither socio-economic rights nor more ambitious welfareism were international project. The problem in Universal Declaration of Human Rights was the in its implementation. It was thoroughly implemented within only few countries, not in okay every country throughout the third world countries, poor countries, underdeveloped countries, but some of exceptions are there. Though UN failed, yes or not? So though UN's some of the affiliated organizations are failed, International Labour Organization ILO it worked better. Actually, ILO has been successful. Our ILO has become successful to implement its convictions throughout the majority of the countries in the world. Welfareism had been national ever since the crisis between the world wars prompted state-led reconstruction. So why welfareism? The concept of welfareism by UNO's Human Rights Declaration became nationalistic because after the world wars, every state they so were more interested. They were more concerned about their nation development, not about the development of other countries. So this nationalistic versus internationalistic, okay, uh, feelings are nationalistic versus internationalistic challenges should be okay, should be mixed. Now next, National Socialism turned as a slogan or program after World War II. As we have or as I have already explained, the problem was National Socialism okay became abundant instead of having international socialism. Socialism only focused in US, in European Atlantic countries. Okay, so this was full blown capitalism is necessary. So the author says full blown capitalism. Capitalism is necessary in underdeveloped countries also. National socialism did not trump as a slogan or program after World War II. Human rights became a defense mechanism for poor nation state or poor nations to use it against their economic failure. So now look at here. Human rights became a defense mechanism for poor nation state or poor nations to use it against their economic failure. Poor nations, how they cope up with this kind of okay unsuccess of their failure to cope up with development. Poor nations, they started to say that okay, they are poor and their basic need is human rights, guarantee of okay, ensuring of human rights. So poor nations, they never talk about like developing infrastructures, industry, technology. Every time they are being constricted over discussing human rights. So if you limit yourself discussing human rights, you will never be able uh, to think beyond human rights. Whereas developed countries, they have gone beyond human rights. Now they talk about technology, they talk about modern individualism, subjectivity, they talk about science and technology. But now look at here, poor countries still, if you see those poor countries like Nepal and then other poor countries, they are still so like stuck in discussing human rights. What is human rights? Human rights are everything. So we have to move beyond human rights. And what kind of countries can move beyond or go beyond human rights? The developed countries. So the author says life is only in North Atlantic states. Actually, if we have to talk the real sense of citizenship, real sense of life, then only the citizens of North Atlantic states, as not like Germany, France, Britain, and then Italy, US, only these countries citizens have experienced the real citizenship. So it shows failure of global south to transplant national welfareism. So third world countries like African countries, southern Indian subcontinent countries, they failed to transplant this national welfareism, concept of national welfareism. They could not modify themselves, their philosophy, and then they still lagged in competition to those Atlantic countries. So this is the problem. Okay, so the author says that do we need another human rights movement? Of course, the author says that because old definition of human rights has become useless. So it fails to fight market fundamentalism. Now the old definition of human rights fails to fight against market fundamentalism. So now the truth is that global social economic justice like local social economic justice would require redistribution under pressure from the rich to poor, something naming and shaming is never likely to achieve even when supplemented by noble forms of legal activism. Okay, if somebody is jealous about those billionaires, if somebody says that billionaires properties should be confiscated, then that kind of logic is not going to work. Instead of blaming some filthy rich people for the poverty, for controlling the large portion of the wealth in the world, we should rather create a system that will redistribute the resources from rich to the poor. Instead of just shaming some rich folks, rich guys like Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and then Bill Gates, Mukesh Ambani, we should focus how can we distribute the resources from rich to poor. Okay, so now human rights advocates in their current guises do not know how to stigmatize inequality. Now in the current periphery, human rights advocates in their current guises do not know how to stigmatize inequality. So how to stigmatize inequality? Current human rights, current definition of human rights, they don't have idea how to disgrace to inequality, because the old definition of human rights, they cannot okay disrespect inequality. They are so weak against inequality that they cannot stigmatize. So stigmatizing means showing disgrace, disrespect to somebody or something. So actually human rights should show disgrace, disrespect to inequality. The inequality is rampant throughout the world, in every country, in every society, but human rights developed by UN, they cannot thoroughly, they cannot openly challenge inequality. They are somewhere afraid of challenging those kind of very unequal laws of equality. So this is quite ironic that human rights laws fundamentals, convictions, strategies, policies, they themselves are full of loopholes, and in a way they cannot challenge inequality that is so much prevalent, and that is making some of the part of the world suffer from very basic facilities, from job, from income. So these kind of human rights advocated by some controlled people is completely so unable to provide equality to all people. So here the author basically talks about failure of old concept of human rights to provide all kinds of modern economic rights to modern man. Modern man does not only need to survive, he needs job with decent income, he needs social security, he needs health security, he needs good health facility, he needs a environment, he needs an environment where he can conduct free business, or where there will be less tax imposition. So all these are kind of modern rights included under economic rights of human beings. So these are the overall discussions under this essay. I hope you got the point. So dear learners, if you like my lecture series, please do not forget to subscribe the channel and share this video among your friends. So thank you for this. We will meet next time. Have a good day ahead. Thank you.